A little break, the poor dears, this week as we head into the parliamentary recess for February. But there's still plenty in the diary in the near future. Let's just remind ourselves of some key upcoming dates. And there they are. We've got the two by-elections on February the 23rd. The budget is on March the 8th. That will be the last ever spring budget, at least under this government anyway, because it moves to the autumn. European Council is meeting in Brussels on the 9th, 10th. And the government deadline for triggering Article 50, self-imposed by the Prime Minister, is the end of March. And then we come to the first round of French presidential elections. That particular round narrows all the candidates. There'll probably be about 8, 9 of them down to 2. The 2 who come first and second then go into a playoff round on May the 7th. And that will determine who the next president will be. Steve, listening to Oliver Letwin and to the Labour leader in the House of Lords, is there any way you think that that end of March deadline for Mrs May could be in jeopardy?
No, I don't actually. And Angela Smith couldn't have been clearer with you that they would do nothing to block not just Article 50, but that timetable. Yeah. So I would be surprised if they don't make it. And given her, Theresa May's, explicit determination to do so, not to do so would have become a sort of problem for her. So I think one way or another
do you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, remember, before this Article 50 vote last week, there was actually a vote in the Commons for the deadline, to agree the deadline, again, by all sides of the House.
Jan, plain sailing, do you think?
Yeah, there's no serious parliamentary resistance. And as Steve says, it would be a personal embarrassment, I think, for the Prime Minister to name the end of March as the deadline and then to miss the deadline unless she has a phenomenally good excuse. I reckon the invocation of Article 50 will actually change the atmosphere of politics for the next 2 years. As soon as those negotiations begin, people in our profession will hunt for any detail and inside information we can find. Things will be leaked, I think, from the European side from time to time. It will dominate the headlines for a solid 2 years and really change politics.
Well, let me just raise a possible a dark cloud, no bigger than a man's hand, that could at least complicate the timetable, because the royal assent on the current timetable has to come around the 13th. I would suggest that the Prime Minister can't trigger that till she does get the royal assent. If there's a bit of ping-pong, it could delay that by several days. And the last thing the Europeans will want, because they've got another, I don't think we showed it up on the screen, they've got another big meeting at the end of March, which is the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. They do not want Article 50 to land on the table as they're celebrating
and Theresa May shouldn't do it then, because it will upset them and set the wrong tone.
It will really infuriate everybody.
My guess is she'll have done it by then, and there won't be much ping-pong. Again, this is between the Commons and the Lords.
Yes.
I mean, Angela Smith couldn't have been clearer that they might send something back, but then they didn't expect a kind of a long play over this. So I don't think there will be ping-pong.
The Lib Dems have a lot more. Again, there's almost an irrelevance in the Commons, but certainly not in the Lords. They feel rather differently about
got a big presence
this.
in the Lords.
Now, we don't know yet what the European Union negotiating position is going to be, and we don't know that because there are several crucial elections taking place. The Dutch taking place in March, and then the one we put up, the French. And at the moment, the French one it seems like it's coming down to a playoff in the second round between Madame Le Pen of the National Front, who could well come first in the first round, and this sort of Blairite figure, independent, centre-left-ish, Mr. Macron. He may well get through and that. And the outcome of that will be an important determinant on our negotiations, Janet.
You couldn't have 2 more different candidates. You've got a nationalist, National Front candidate, and on the other hand, the closest thing France could ever have to a liberal president, you'd imagine. And it
with
would
a small L.
With a small L, a reformist, economically liberal president. And it would be the most French thing in the world to elect someone who, while the rest of the world is electing populists and anti-elitists, to elect someone who I think is the son of a teacher and a neurology professor who has very centrist, economically liberal views, who went to ENA, is absolutely a member of the French elite. It would be the most French thing in the world for them to elect someone like Emmanuel Macron in this zeitgeist, which is why I can absolutely see them doing it, actually.
If it's Le Pen in the second round, then Brexit becomes a minor sideshow. If it's Le Pen, the very future of the European Union is now in danger, regardless of whether we were in or out. But I would suggest that if it's Mr. Macron, that still presents some problems. He doesn't have his own party. He will not have a majority in the French Assembly. He is untried and untested. He wants to do a number of things that will be unpopular, which is why a number of people close to Mrs. Le Pen tell me that she's got her eye on 2022. She thinks it will go to hell in a handbasket under Mr. Macron.
Yeah, but he hasn't got the experience at all. And we've seen what happens when you get politicians who aren't very experienced getting elected to major roles. And what I find absolutely fascinating here is now it's not just all to play for in France and such big choices ahead of them. It's the fact that what happens in France, and indeed what happens in Germany, not so much Holland, I think, but Germany later on in the year, the federal elections there, is how much it impacts on what we are going to get in terms of our deal, how much our Brexit vote is impacting on them. Madame Le Pen, as you say, her situation in terms of Brexit is only really coming about really because of our Brexit vote. And it's at the time that we are trying to, as a leaver, withdrawing ourselves from European politics, it is fascinating how much European politics are going to affect us.
And you do see what Matthew Goodwin was talking about earlier in the show, is that what we do know, almost for sure, is that the socialist candidate will not get through to the second round.
Yeah, interestingly.
It could come fifth. But the centre-right candidate, I mean, if we were discussing this a month ago, we'd be saying it will be a playoff between the centre-right candidate and the National Front.
Yeah.
Now we're not even saying that.
No, and in fact, Matthew Goodwin, who's spent a lot of time in France recently, isn't entirely sure that Le Pen will get into the second round, which is quite interesting. It is, I mean, it's going to be as important for the future of the European Union as in retrospect the 2015 British general election was. Remember, if Labour had got in, there would have been no referendum. So that referendum has transformed the European Union because we're leaving. And the French election is as significant, I think.
Well, we think it's very important, which is why we will be live from Paris on April the 23rd, on the day that France goes to the first round of polls. Now, Tom Watson, the Labour deputy leader, he was on the Andrew Marr show earlier today. He was... So, Julia, I don't know why you're all giggling.
I just find it untenable that the deputy leader of the Labour Party could keep going. He's a very good media performer, and he comes on and he's very avuncular, and he's sitting there saying, well, you know, yes, things are a bit bad, aren't they? But don't worry, we're looking at what we can do to win 2020. The idea that Tony Blair and Gordon Brown were sitting in their offices or on TV screens at this time in the electoral cycle thinking, well, I wonder if we can come up with a policy that the British people might like, and I wonder if we can have a lead. It's an absolute nonsense. I mean, this is Tuesday night book club stuff. All
right. Well, I'm going to ask you the question I was going to ask before. She interrupted me. I mean, how has that ever happened?
By giggling.
I would suggest that he's right. The deputy Labour leader, Tom Watson, is right. The leadership of the Labour Party is settled, with one caveat: unless the Corbynistas themselves to decide to move on Mr. Corbyn. If the left of the Labour Party decides, then it's not settled. But if that doesn't happen, it is settled.
That in many ways would be the worst situation if you're a Labour moderate, because the Corbynistas would be saying, actually, the problem is not Corbynism, it's Corbyn himself. And if we have a younger, more dynamic, telegenic person leading the whole process, we can win the next general election or a future general election, which means you have another iteration of this. You have another 5-year experiment. And that's the worst of all worlds. I think if you're a Labour moderate, if you're someone like Tom Watson, what you want is, and this is the most realistic scenario, Jeremy Corbyn contests the next general election, possibly loses quite badly, and then a Labour moderate runs for the leadership saying, well, we've tried your way. But the worst would be Corbyn going, a younger version of him trying, and then the experiment being extended for a number of years. So I see no easy way out of this for someone like Tom Watson.
No,
and that's why he radiated all the enthusiasm of, I think, someone in a hostage video in that, in that interview.
Oh, maybe he's got the Stockholm Syndrome now. The Labour moderates have had their day in the sun. They're 2 days in the sun, and they lost both times. Yeah. So I suggest they're not going to try for the hat trick again.
No way.
Is there any indication that on the more Corbyn wing of the Labour Party, there is now doubts about their man?
Yes. I mean, just to translate Tom Watson, what he meant was, I, Tom Watson, am not going to get involved in another attempted coup because I tried it last time and it was a catastrophe. That's the translation when he says the leadership question is settled. Self-evidently, the leadership question isn't settled because there is speculation on a daily basis. And I disagree. I think Julia said that this lot don't care about winning elections. I think they do. And if the current position continues, I think one of two things will happen. Either Jeremy Corbyn will decide himself that he doesn't want to carry on. I think he's conflicted about it. He half enjoys it and half hates it.
Finds it a strange.
Yeah. And if that doesn't happen, I think there will be some people around him who will say, look, this isn't working. Because with a fixed term parliament, there's another, 3.5 years of it.
Yeah, there's a long while to go.
And I can't see it lasting in this way, with politics in such a state of flux. The Tories are going to be under a lot of pressure over Brexit in the coming 2 years. To have opinion polls at this level, I think is unsustainable.
Final thought from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea that it is another 3.5 years is just madness. But of course, the people that they're putting up as possible replacements for Jeremy Corbyn, apparently they've been focus grouping them. I mean, realistically, most members of Commons wouldn't know who most of these people were, let alone members of the public.
Rebecca Long-Bailey was mentioned as one. Angela, help me here.
One of the,
Rayner, Angela Rayner, right.
They're not overwhelmed with leadership potential at the moment, which is
very, very diplomatically put.
Neither are the Tories, actually, but they just
No,
they happen to have
leaders.
one at the moment too. All right, that's it. Thank you. It's February recess coming up next week in Parliament, so there's no daily or Sunday politics next week. That's the way our calendar runs. But the daily politics will be back on Monday, the 20th of February, and I'll be back here with the Sunday politics on the 26th. Remember, if it's Sunday, it's the Sunday politics, unless, of course, it's the recess. Bye-bye. 23rd, off the back of this week, we will bring you the results of both these crucial by-elections.